The judge adjusted his glasses and looked directly at my older brother. "Mr. Walker," he said calmly, "are you absolutely certain this is your father's final will?" Without the slightest hesitation, my brother smiled. "Yes, Your Honor." His lawyer nodded confidently beside him. Across the courtroom, I stayed silent. I didn't argue. I didn't interrupt. I simply rested one hand on the worn leather briefcase at my feet. Inside it lay a yellow envelope that had remained hidden for nearly 15 years. My father had never trusted banks. He never trusted lawyers completely, either. Instead, he trusted old habits. He believed that if something truly mattered, it should stay close to home. My brother thought he had already won. The farm. The house. The barns. The land our grandfather had cleared with his own hands. He believed it would all belong to him before the day was over. He had no idea that one forgotten wooden floorboard was about to destroy everything he had planned. My name is Ethan Walker. I spent my entire life on my family's farm in western Kansas. To most people, it looked ordinary. 500 acres of wheat fields stretching to the horizon. An old red barn with faded paint. A white farmhouse that had survived more than 80 winters. And a weathered oak tree standing proudly beside the front porch. That farm wasn't just where I grew up. It was where my father taught me how to work. He taught me that a man's handshake should mean something. That animals deserved respect. That every fence you built should be strong enough to protect what mattered most. My older brother, Ryan, never cared much for those lessons. Even as kids, we couldn't have been more different. While I woke before sunrise to help Dad feed the cattle, Ryan slept until noon whenever school was out. I loved fixing tractors with my father. Ryan loved talking about city life. He always said farming was for people who were afraid of success. Dad never argued with him. He would simply smile and say, "One day you'll understand that money can buy land, but it can't buy roots." Ryan always laughed. He thought our father was old-fashioned. Maybe he was. But everything Dad believed had been built through 50 years of honest work. Every acre carried a story. Every fence post reminded him of someone who had helped build it. Every harvest represented another year our family survived. Then everything changed. One cold November morning, Dad collapsed beside the grain silo. The doctors called it a massive heart attack. They said it happened instantly. He never suffered. Somehow. That didn't make losing him hurt any less. The funeral brought together nearly everyone in our county. Neighbors. Old friends. Veterans. Farmers who had worked beside my father decades earlier. One by one they shared stories about the kind of man he had been. Honest. Fair. Dependable. The kind of man who would stop harvesting his own fields if someone else's barn caught fire. Standing beside his grave, I promised myself I would protect everything he had spent his life building. I had no idea. My biggest fight wouldn't come from drought. Or debt. Or failing crops. It would come from my own brother. Ryan didn't even wait a week after the funeral. One evening he walked into the farmhouse carrying a thick folder. He dropped it onto the kitchen table. "We need to sell." I looked at him. "Sell what?" "The farm." I thought he was joking. He wasn't. He unfolded several documents and pushed them toward me. A developer offered $8 million. That's more money than Dad ever dreamed of. I pushed the papers back. Dad never wanted this place sold. Ryan leaned back in his chair. "Dad's gone. It's our decision now." I shook my head. "No." His smile slowly disappeared. "I wasn't asking." He reached into the folder and placed another document on the table. A copy of my father's will. According to the document, Ryan would inherit nearly everything. The farmhouse. The land. The equipment. Even the family cemetery. My name appeared only once. A small cash inheritance. $20,000. That was it. I stared at the signature. It looked like my father's handwriting. But something about it didn't feel right. Not because it looked fake. Because it didn't sound like the man I knew. My father always believed both of his sons should be treated equally. He told everyone that. Neighbors. Friends. Even our family attorney. Why would he suddenly leave almost everything to Ryan? For the first time in my life, I began to wonder if someone had rewritten my father's final wishes. And deep down, I feared I already knew the answer. My father's signature kept replaying in my mind. I had seen that handwriting thousands of times. Birthday cards. Property tax forms. Old letters he wrote to my mother. Even the notes he used to leave on the refrigerator every harvest season. Something about this will felt wrong. Ryan noticed me staring at the document. He smiled. What? You think Dad made a mistake? I looked up. I think Dad deserves better than questions that can't be answered. Ryan laughed. The answers are right in front of you. Everything's legal. Everything's signed. You lost. He gathered the papers and walked toward the front door. Before leaving, he turned around. You have 30 days to move out. The door slammed shut. For several minutes, I sat alone in the old kitchen. The silence felt heavier than ever before. My eyes wandered around the room. Nothing had changed. Dad's old coffee mug still sat beside the sink. His work gloves still hung beside the back door. His favorite hat rested on the same hook where he'd left it the morning he died. Yet somehow, the house already felt different. It felt like someone was trying to erase him. That night, I couldn't sleep. Around midnight, I walked through the farmhouse carrying a flashlight. Every room reminded me of him. The living room where he taught us to play chess. The dining table where we celebrated every Thanksgiving. The hallway where Mom marked our height on the wall every birthday. Then I remembered something Dad once told me. If you're ever looking for something important, don't start upstairs. Start where the house began. At the time, I thought he was talking about memories. Now, I wasn't so sure. The oldest part of the farmhouse was the original study. A small room my father almost never allowed anyone to enter. After he passed away, I had simply locked the door. I hadn't touched anything inside. Until now. I unlocked it. The smell of old wood and leather filled the room. Everything looked exactly as he had left it. An old oak desk. A bookshelf packed with farming journals. A rusty lantern. Family photographs dating back nearly 60 years. I slowly searched through every drawer. Tax records. Insurance papers. Old newspaper clippings. Nothing unusual. After nearly an hour, I was ready to give up. Then my flashlight caught something strange. One of the floorboards beneath the desk looked newer than the others. I knelt down. Ran my fingers across the wood. There was a tiny metal ring hidden inside the crack. Almost invisible. My heart started racing. Dad had built this room himself. If something was hidden here, he had put it there. I pulled the ring gently. The floorboard lifted. Beneath it was a small metal box covered in dust. The lock had rusted years ago. It opened with almost no effort. Inside lay several old photographs. A pocket watch. My mother's wedding ring. And a large yellow envelope. Across the front, written in my father's unmistakable handwriting, were 7 words. The first document inside immediately caught my attention. Across the top, in bold letters, were the words, Last Will and Testament. I turned the page. My father's original signature stared back at me. So did two witness signatures that were completely different from the ones on the copy Ryan had shown me. I looked at the date. It had been signed just 6 months before my father died. Which meant only one thing. The will Ryan had presented couldn't be the final one. And suddenly, everything began to make sense. The envelope slipped from my hands onto the old wooden desk. For several long seconds, I simply stared at it. My father hadn't hidden money. He hadn't hidden gold. He had hidden the truth. I carefully unfolded the first page. It was his original will. Not a copy. Not a draft. The original. Every page carried his initials. Every signature had been notarized. Every witness had signed in blue ink. This wasn't something anyone could fake overnight. I continued reading. My father had divided everything equally. Half of the farm would belong to me. Half would belong to Ryan. But there was one condition. One sentence that changed everything. If either son attempts to deceive, pressure, threaten, or defraud the other in order to gain ownership of the family farm, that son shall immediately forfeit all inheritance rights. I read the sentence again. Then a third time. My father had seen this coming. Years before his death. He had already known greed could tear the family apart. Beneath the will was another handwritten letter. It began simply. My dear Ethan. If you're reading this, something has gone terribly wrong. I felt a lump form in my throat. It was like hearing my father's voice again. I pray both of you honor this farm together. But if Ryan ever places money above family, don't hate him. Just protect what generations before us worked to build. I've hidden this will because I fear someone may try to replace it. If that day comes, take this document to Samuel Harris. He knows the truth. Samuel Harris. Our family's attorney. He had retired nearly 5 years earlier. I hadn't spoken to him since Dad's funeral. I looked at the clock. It was nearly 1 o'clock in the morning. There was no way I was waiting until sunrise. I grabbed the envelope, locked the farmhouse, and drove through the empty country roads. Samuel lived nearly 30 miles away. His farmhouse was surrounded by old maple trees. One light still burned inside. I knocked twice. After a few moments, the door slowly opened. Samuel looked older than I remembered. His hair was almost completely white. But his sharp blue eyes recognized me immediately. Ethan. I was wondering when you'd come. I froze. You knew? He slowly nodded. I'd been expecting this day for years. I handed him the envelope. Without saying a word, he opened it. The moment he saw the first page, he closed his eyes. I prayed Ryan would never force you to find this. So it's real? Samuel looked directly at me. It's absolutely real. I drafted it myself. My heart began pounding. Then the will Ryan showed me. Samuel's face grew serious. Is not the final will. Silence filled the room. He walked to an old filing cabinet, unlocked the bottom drawer, and pulled out another folder. Inside was a certified duplicate of the very same will I had just discovered. Every signature matched. Every page matched. Every witness matched. Samuel sighed deeply. I kept this copy under your father's instructions. He told me. If anyone ever shows another will, you'll know exactly what happened. I looked at him. What happens now? Samuel closed the folder. Now, we prove the truth. But Ethan, this isn't just about a forged will anymore. If someone replaced your father's legal documents, they committed a serious crime. I swallowed hard. For the first time, I realized this wasn't just a family dispute. Someone had planned this. Someone had expected me to walk away. Someone believed the truth would stay buried forever. They were about to learn. My father had planned one move ahead of them all. The next morning, Samuel Harris arrived at the courthouse with me. He wasn't just carrying the original will. He was carrying 35 years of records. Every meeting with my father. Every legal amendment. Every notarized document. Every signature. If anyone questioned the authenticity of my father's wishes, Samuel had the evidence to answer them. As we walked through the courthouse doors, I spotted Ryan standing beside his attorney. He looked relaxed. Confident. Like a man who believed victory was only minutes away. When he saw Samuel, his smile faded. "What's he doing here?" Ryan asked. I didn't answer. Instead, I walked straight into the courtroom. The hearing began exactly at 9 o'clock. Judge Eleanor Mitchell entered the courtroom. Everyone stood. After the formal introductions, Ryan's attorney stood first. "Your Honor, this is a straightforward inheritance dispute. My client possesses the deceased's final will. He respectfully requests that ownership of the Walker farm be transferred immediately." The judge nodded. "Mr. Walker." She looked toward me. "Do you dispute the authenticity of this will?" "I do, Your Honor. And I have evidence." The courtroom became silent. Samuel slowly stood beside me. "Your Honor. My name is Samuel Harris. I served as Robert Walker's attorney for over 3 decades. I personally prepared his final will." Ryan's attorney immediately objected. "The witness retired years ago." Samuel smiled. "The truth doesn't retire." A few people in the courtroom quietly chuckled. The judge raised her hand. "Proceed." Samuel placed 2 documents on the evidence table. The first document is the will submitted by Mr. Ryan Walker. The second is the original will signed by Robert Walker 6 months before his death. The judge carefully examined both documents. At first glance, they looked almost identical. Then she noticed something. "The signatures aren't the S." "No, Your Honor. They are not." Ryan shifted nervously in his chair. His attorney leaned toward him and whispered something urgently. Ryan's face turned pale. Samuel continued. "The witnesses listed on Mr. Ryan Walker's document were never present when Robert signed his will. In fact, one of those witnesses had already passed away 2 years before the date printed on this document." The courtroom erupted with whispers. The judge looked sharply toward Ryan. "Is that true?" Ryan didn't answer. His attorney stood quickly. "Your Honor, we'd like a brief recess." Denied. The judge's voice was firm. "I want an explanation." Ryan swallowed hard. I didn't know." Samuel slowly opened another folder. "There's more." He held up a sealed envelope. "This was left by Robert Walker to be opened only if the authenticity of his will was ever challenged." The judge accepted the envelope. She broke the seal carefully. Inside was a handwritten letter. She began reading silently. As she reached the final paragraph, her expression completely changed. She looked directly at Ryan. Then back at me. Finally, she placed the letter on the bench. "Mr. Ryan Walker, I suggest you speak very carefully from this moment forward. For the first time since this case began." My brother looked genuinely afraid. Because he had just realized. Our father had anticipated every move he might make. And the courtroom was about to hear exactly why. Judge Mitchell's words echoed through the courtroom. "This hearing is concluded." The gavel struck once. For a few seconds, no one moved. Ryan remained seated, staring at the table in front of him. His attorney quietly packed his files without saying a single word. The confidence they had carried into court that morning had completely disappeared. I looked at my brother. He looked older than he had just a few hours earlier. Not because of time, but because the weight of his choices had finally caught up with him. As people slowly began leaving the courtroom, Ryan stood and walked toward me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, he looked me in the eyes. "I'm sorry." His voice barely rose above a whisper. "I never thought it would go this far." I studied his face. The anger I'd carried for months suddenly felt much smaller. "You didn't lose because I found the hidden will," I said quietly. "You lost the moment you chose greed over family." Ryan lowered his head. Tears filled his eyes. "I know. I'd give anything to take it back." I nodded. "So would Dad." Without another word, he turned and walked away. I watched him disappear through the courthouse doors. I didn't know if I'd ever see him again. Weeks passed. The criminal investigation into Victor Hale moved quickly. Investigators discovered forged legal documents, fake witness signatures, and evidence that he had manipulated several elderly landowners across the state. The hidden will wasn't just enough to save my family's farm. It helped expose a much larger fraud scheme. Victor Hale was arrested. His company collapsed within months. Several victims finally recovered property they thought they had lost forever. As for Ryan, he accepted responsibility for his actions. Because he had cooperated with investigators and admitted the truth, the court showed him some leniency. He avoided prison. But the damage to his reputation would take years to repair. One quiet Sunday morning, I drove back to the farm. The sunrise spread across the wheat fields exactly the way it had when I was a little boy. The old red barn still stood proudly against the horizon. The windmill turned slowly in the breeze. Everything felt peaceful again. I walked to the small family cemetery behind the oak trees. My father's headstone stood beside my mother's. I knelt quietly. "You were right, Dad. The farm was never about money. It was about protecting what matters." The wind gently moved through the trees. For a moment, it almost felt like he was standing beside me again. Months later, the farmhouse was full of life once more. Children from nearby schools visited every spring to learn about farming. Neighbors gathered for community dinners in the old barn. The land continued producing wheat, just as it had for generations. Every evening, I sat on the front porch with a cup of coffee, watching the sunset over the fields my grandfather had once plowed with horses. I often thought about that hidden wooden floorboard. My father could have placed the will in a bank. He could have left it with another lawyer. Instead, he hid it inside the home he loved most. Maybe he knew that the greatest treasures aren't always meant to be locked inside vaults. Sometimes, they're hidden inside the places where love was built. If this story taught me anything, it's that greed can steal money. It can steal trust. It can even divide a family. But the truth has a way of finding daylight. Sooner or later, every lie reaches its harvest, and every honest seed eventually grows. The Walker family farm still stands today. Not because of luck. Not because of money. But because one father's final wish refused to stay buried beneath an old wooden floor.